Herzlich willkommen, meine Damen und Herren. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome at Theater Basel. My name is Andreas Ruby. I'm the director of the Swiss Architecture Museum, and we are very happy to be able to welcome you here in what I think is the most beautiful civic public space in this city. The Theater Basel inaugurated in 1975, and since 3 years now, a fantastic bad weather public space, as we can see now. And I think this space is made for things like this. So we thought it's a beautiful occasion to host a lecture of a very special guest in this space. But before I introduce you the special guest, I would like to give the word over to Esther Bauer, who is the artistic director of Open House Basel. And Open House Basel is the entire Kontext, the festival in which this lecture takes place and which it has the pleasure to inaugurate. Esther.
Danke, Andreas. Herzlich willkommen hier in Basel, für alle, die das sonst nicht immer da sind. I welcome you here in Basel. My name is Esther. I organize the Open House Basel, and this is like the starting point for our weekend event. So tomorrow and Sunday you will be able to visit a lot of houses. And this year we have several events that are already in the week before. And this year is one that we organized in cooperation with Sam. And we are really happy to have you all here. We are happy to have Tiantian here. And I just wish you a wonderful weekend with Open House.
Danke. Ja, vielen Dank. Thanks a lot. We're very happy to be part of Open House Basel because it's the coolest version of an architecture museum in my understanding, because it's the moment when you can actually go and visit buildings that normally you can never actually see. So I'm really happy that we are part of this. I would like now to introduce Martino Pederozzi, who is an architect from Mendrisio, and who will tell us a little bit about something beautiful that happened yesterday, which is that Tiantian, our speaker today, got maybe one of the most important architecture awards of this country, the Swiss Architecture Award, and it's in cooperation with the Fondazione and with the Accademia of Mendrisio that we were able to welcome Tiantian here. Martino, please.
Thanks, Andreas. So good evening to everybody. My presentation will be very, very brief. I just want to bring the greetings from the Fondazione Teatro dell'Architettura and from the Accademia di Architettura Mendrisio, of which I am a board member. As you maybe know, the foundation del Teatro dell'Architettura Mendrisio is the promoter of the prize that Tiantian got yesterday, the Swiss Architectural Award. The prize has been established in 2007, so it is the 8th edition. And since 2019, the jury, chaired by our president, Mario Botta, includes the deans of the 3 Swiss architectural schools of Università della Svizzera Italiana, Accademia di Architettura, ETH and the PFL. It means Walter Rangonese, Tom Emerson, and Dieter Dietz. The prize is recognized as one of the most important prize of architecture, internationally speaking. It has a price of an amount of 100,000 francs, which is also a very important sum in the international panorama. It is open to architects that are younger than 50 years old, and all the participants are selected by a whole battery of observers that are around all the globe and propose the architects to the jury. The aim of the prize is to recognize significant contributions to the contemporary architectural debate, with a particular focus on environmental issues. So, as a member of the Teatro dell'Architettura Foundation, I am really delighted with the choice of the prize jury of this year, which rightly saw in the work of Tiantian the highest expression of its principles. So thank you, Shu, very much for being here. Thank you, Andreas, for the hospitality, and have a nice lecture to all of you.
I would like to introduce now tonight's speaker, Xu Tiantian. Welcome. And let me briefly introduce her. Xu Tiantian is an architect from China. She studied architecture at the Tsinghua University in China and later at Harvard. She had her first working experience in the US and then in the Netherlands, worked for a brief time at OMA, and then very quickly started practicing with her own office, whose name you see not really behind me, but will later come, DNA, Design and Architecture. And what struck me about her work when I saw it 4 years ago in China is that she basically introduced a paradigm change in the whole discussion of urbanism. Until then, the idea was that more and more people will live in the cities. We all know these statistics. 50% of the population of the world will live in cities by that and that year. And in the end, it was 6 years will be by then and then that year. So there was the understanding that landscape, the rural territory, will progressively void out. Nobody will be left there, and nobody really understood, well, how will we actually feed ourselves? Who produces our food? Artificial intelligence? Anything? So nobody really thought about this. And then in Asia, in several different countries in Asia, there was a paradigm change that was introduced by a couple of theoreticians who actually said, no, the relationship of the city and the countryside has always been a dynamic one. It's never just one or the other. They correlate in an interesting way. And in about that time, that's about 2013, 14, she started to work for the region which you see here, Songyang County, and understood that architects have a responsibility to work also in favor of the countryside, especially when the countryside is an endangered species, by depopulation, economic deprivation, and also climate change. And since then, she has worked in this valley and in other areas and has produced an oeuvre which is mind-blowing, because she shows actually what you can do with architecture to actually stimulate the self-healing powers of the territory itself. She calls this acupuncture, so she makes the needles, but the body of the landscape reacts. And that's a very beautiful story to unfold. And we wanted to invite her here because we think that many of the strategies and the techniques that she has found then, because she lives in Beijing and practices in Beijing as well. So she's a big city girl, but she discovered the landscape and said, okay, there's something we need to do as architects. We need to make sure that the people that once lived here have a perspective for the future as well. And many of her projects, and she has realized 20 individual projects now, plus 3 quarries, which you will see later, have had the consequence that not only fewer people left these villages than before, but actually people that had left came back. That's quite a stunning operation. Xu Tiantian.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you so much for coming today. I actually just an hour ago I was wondering, is anybody going to come over here?
Here's the light, so then people see you better.
Okay, thank you. But I mean that yes, right in the spotlight, and I forgot my glasses today. But it's really wonderful to see you, to be here with you and in Basel. My name is Xu Tiantian. My office is called DNA, Design and Architecture. So it's a no-name office, and yes, we have a very small office, 6 to 8 people. So it's very small size for the Chinese firms. But it works with, I think as an architect working in China, you just have to develop your own pattern, you know, the method to also to operate an office, operate your practice that's comfortable with you or with whatever suits you. So I feel like this actually, a small firm actually leads to the pattern of our practice in the long term. And I am very, I think it's, for me, it's a very, not only comfortable, but really a very, a structure that I'm used to. So, and that's the way that, you know, it's not just only the practice of architecture, but really a journey for me, for myself, to explore our culture, tradition, especially in the rural context. And at the same time, I realized that architecture can be something very effective. It could be really a social means, a social strategy to revive the rural region. So it becomes a process of social intervention. So I will walk you through the Songyang story, where I first started to visit a mountain village in China. That was really my first time in my life, and also the beginning of how we eventually get to understand the countryside, the rural villages, and the history. So this is the Songyang, very typical mountain village in the county, in the mountain, in this region. And this is a very typical agricultural county in Zhejiang province, southwest of Hangzhou or Shanghai city. Actually, you need to drive for 5 hours to get into the mountain, to the Songyang County. And of course, when underneath the beautiful scenic images, and you will discover that if you walk into the village, of course, 9 years ago, the January of 2014, when we first visited this region and walk into the villages, this was really the very typical images that you can you could take every part in almost every villages. So in a way, like other rural regions, in this Songyang County, especially in the villages, the young people, younger generation, eventually moved out to cities for, of course, better employment and better opportunities. And many of the villages become, we call it hollow village. It means that very low in its population, and the villages and the community left behind just didn't have any hope or confidence in their social or economic future. And this is the county urban center with 50,000 population. So you could see there was already, you know, there's partially, this was the original fabric, and there was also new developments in certain part of the county urban center. And with its 50,000 population, it's an intermediate scale of urban structure. But the county also have 190,000 population, agricultural populations living in thousands of small villages scattering around. So I wanted to start with a project actually looking into all these vacant housing, farmers' houses in the Tiantian village. So this is as the first introduction actually to guide you through the social and architectural fabric of an ancient Chinese village. Tiantian village has a history of 600 years and used to be a glorious history in the past and in this region. But at the moment, was in 2017, when we first visited with the village, there were not many inhabitants staying within the village. Most of the buildings, well, it's a it's a traditional village looking beautiful from distance. But if you walk inside, within the village, this is the situation. This is a very common condition with all these abandoned houses. And you know, with the traditional rammed earth and this timber tenant mortise structure building, if you need actually basically this type of houses you need to maintain by the residents almost every year or every few years. So after being vacant and abandoned for many years, most of the houses in the village will actually become unsafe structure. So we worked with this village community. Well, when I say community, that includes some of the inhabitants, a few inhabitants still remaining in the village, but also those who moved away to the cities or to the county urban center, and they still possess their ownership of these family houses in the village. So there was a common agreement after many meetings with the village community representative and also with the local authorities in the town level, in the county level. We worked together into this project called a transformation for this village, with all its mostly is to look into the vacant abandoned houses and convert it into a collective economic entity. So it means a startup idea really initiated and agreed by everyone, for the village inhabitants or village relatives, and the neighbor villages also participated, and also through the agreement and collaboration subsidy from the town and from the county level. So first of all, we worked with this renovation process. In terms of the architectural design, it was mostly about the preservation, because this is the traditional village, and this sets an example of how to work with the local building techniques, building material, also with the local craftsmen, to preserve the building to original fabric and profiles of each buildings, and also to maintain you see the texture, these are the mending texture over the original rammed earth texture. So the process actually worked very smoothly with the local construction teams, because they are all really local skilled craftsmen who are particularly they are the experts on this type of construction, and this is the traditional building, historical building in the village center, open as a public space, and then of course the interior also worked with new additions to introduce as a community space or a space open for visitors. And so this transformation project worked to collect all these abandoned vacant houses, and to first of all work with the preservation for the exterior, but the interior can be reopened, reorganized, because of this very flexible tenant and mortise wooden structure. And it was also a very fast construction phase, because all these joints can easily work together. And the interior, of course, was redesigned with this open space, and with the converted into a living area for visitors, but it can also be shared by the local original inhabitants or the village community, who the villagers who are living in the cities but can also come back and visit for a short stay. And these are some of the drawings that you could tell that it doesn't change the envelope of this rammed earth, which is the wrapping system. And because in this case, the rammed earth in this region, they are functioning as the wrapping walls, and it needs the internal independent wooden structure, timber structure, which is easy to assemble and to disassemble. And these are some of the spaces that provide a new interior, but also maintain its original exterior and the texture of time or of different layers. And the work was done by the local villagers. But what's more important through this project is that I want to introduce this social structure of village in China. The Chinese village is basically a large family that every households are related, connected. And that's practically a large family clan living on this site for hundreds of years and through generations, and eventually develop into a village, consists of, like the Tiantian village, it was with over 60 households in total. So this project, based on this collective community, it's a collective ownership of the village. So it's actually very unique in the Chinese social structure. It's in between private ownership and public ownership, like public state-owned. Usually, all the land ownership in the cities, that's public ownership. But in the rural side, we have the family ownership, which is private ownership. But also, some of the assets in the village belong to village collective as a co-op or collective ownership. So what I want to introduce, I think you probably have gone through all the text. What I wanted to introduce here is that this project was rather a social design process to engage the villages as a shareholder, either with their assets or with their houses or with their farmlands, as the collective ownership of this new business structure. So, and also engages the village community collective, because there's some of the land or some of the houses, if the owner passed away without any offsprings, and then the land, the property will go to the village collective. And also the subsidy from town and from county, and join as companies as the subsidy funding, but also as the shareholders to support this economic entity. So it really becomes a hybrid. It's a very innovative hybrid economic structure. The reason that I wanted to introduce that is that this project, even though you don't see much of the modern design, it was the architectural design was more about this preservation in a careful way, in a rather sensitive way, also economic way. But the social design was really a breakthrough, because then this project will protect the ownership of all these farmers, the local villagers, and village community, and to engage them into this market economy. So they still have the ownership, instead of like the other, most of the homestay businesses around this area are rather through urban investors, and to buy off the properties from the local villagers with very low price. And which is, I mean, the rural tourism is becoming a popular industry in China. So this is also and at this time, we also need to be very careful to avoid another round of rip-off from urban private investors, and to preserve the economic potential for these villagers. And so this project actually provides a economic structure to not only to protect the economic potential of these villages, but at the same time also provide an alternative living pattern, living environment for urban residents. So to attract visitors from the county urban center, from the neighbor counties within this region, but really to enjoy and to experience the very local traditional lifestyle, and also become a educational platform for the young children, young school children, to come to the nature, to understand the tradition, and so on. So now let's get into this acupuncture method. That's the ancient map showing Songyang County with flat land in the center, and it's surrounded by mountains and with the villages. Most of the villages are in the mountain region, but some are also at the vicinity of this county urban center. And with the acupuncture project, we have been working in the region since the beginning of 2014, and we've come up with, after the first year actually was more a learning and understanding process. After we worked with over a dozen pro bono projects in a village, very small projects, we realized that every village has something they are proud of in terms of its tradition, history, ancestor or heritage as their legacy. So we brought up this acupuncture proposal to the local communities and authorities so it's a collective collaboration between the different levels of local authorities and also village communities. The acupuncture means that you place a needle in the very critical part, and the idea wasn't about the injection, but rather to promote the circulation, and it's a healing process for long-term well-being. So we take this term to introduce a small, in each village or each location, to introduce a small scale of public program, really tailored to its own context or heritage, and to serve the local community, and also to integrate the rural tourism as an effective industry to build up this circulation, not only between the villages, but also with the county urban center to increase this urban rural interactions. And when I say tourism, it's not like the resort scale of tourism, but it's rather a cultural, educational tourism to understand the local culture and tradition. So we've worked with the culture. This is the example of a Hakka indenture museum in a Shicang village, which is Hakka village. That Hakka means the guest family, right? The guest people. So that means they moved to the area around 200 years ago, and the indenture system is basically the legal documents for every business activities, land deeds or contracts document written down on paper. But it's really a very detailed archive for Hakka society, for the history. So if you go through the collection of this Shicang village, is probably the biggest Hakka indenture collection in the entire country, and it was done by an elementary school teacher in the past 2 decades. So there was really a very unique and precious documents within this village, Shicang village. So this became the incentive for a indenture museum in a village. And this project, this museum also brings the opportunity to restore a long-lost masonry building technique. If you look at this house, we thought this was extremely beautiful, just with the stone they collect in the mountain or from the local quarries. But you can really see the tectonics of building with these corners as the structural corners and infill of the small stones or even the pebbles they collect from the river. So that gives the inspiration also for not only to revive this building technique, heritage, but at the same time it also becomes the inspiration to formulate, to articulate a space that could bring you to a different dimension, a space with a different time dimension, it's a history, a place to contemplate this Hakka indenture, the history belonging to the Hakka society, and of course, it's working with the existing creek on the site. It becomes the passage or indication of the circulation in the space within the Indenture Museum, and it became also a very popular summer pavilion for the local villagers. And we worked with a flatland village, a Wang village, which is this is a regional Wang village, and now it's totally surrounded by all these factories and chimneys, and because of its location, it's just right next to the county urban center. So with this village, on the first day of our visit, it was pouring, and we walked through the village, and it was really, this is the scene that that was the original existing condition that we saw in the village. But when we talked with the villagers, and we asked them, what's special about Wang village? What makes your village special? And this is always the first question we asked on our first meeting. So that really brought up a long conversation, and they were introduced to you with their history, their ancestor, and or their heritage. So in this case, this is Wang Jing, who's the chief editor of this Yongle encyclopedia from Ming Dynasty, which is the largest encyclopedia in the world. And Wang Jing is one of the three historical figures, the most famous historical figures in Songyang region. So this brought up the idea of building a new memorial hall for ancestor Wang Jing at the center of the Wang village, facing the original Wang family ancestors hall. And this building is to restore the pride and honor of this Wang village for the community, for the villages. And the building is actually, the exterior is rather humble with traditional ram earth, and of course you start to see this cement, actually the concrete structure system extruding on the rooftop, but it's creating a dialogue with the neighbor buildings, and the interior is articulated into a walkway to go through different stages of the ancestors' life story. So every structural corner was converted into a memorial corner indicating the life moments from his childhood and within the Wang village, and he became a scholar, an imperial scholar, and then eventually someone very famous and important, of course. So the idea of this converting the structure corner into memorial corner for its history, for the story, and is to actually to free up the entire space. So it's working it's a public space for different activities, but also to utilize the corner space as the memorial. And then we worked with infrastructure like this one, Shimen, this original Shimen bridge. And with this new bridge for vehicles built in the 90s, eventually the Shimen bridge was abandoned and become unsafe structure. I don't have the image, but then we proposed to actually preserve the original bridge structure and also adding a new wooden canopy, so it becomes a pedestrian walkway and also a shared common space by two villages across the river. And so this is also a tradition within this region that you see this very typical lounge bridge. I think it's also kind of typology in Switzerland as well, that you have this covered bridge. It's also a very important meeting place for events, and also for festivals as well. So this bridge becomes a pedestrian walkway and a multifunctional common space for the local communities. And well, this is a very simple structure, just reflecting the structural rhythm of this original bridge, but it instantly create this pattern of walking through this 270 meters long bridge walkway. And we worked with a natural material, and this is the bamboo theater. And am I blocking some of the views here? I just realized, I'm so sorry. So this is a very simple exercise with the local villagers. They were able to weave the live bamboo into an open space in nature. And I always wanted to take this image. Well, the idea of our space didn't started with the image, but there was really a good reference afterward, sent through an architect's friend. And this is a painting by Chiu Ying from Ming Dynasty, and solidarity in the garden. And it indicates this very traditional Chinese literati spirit of how to have at ease with nature. And our bamboo theater is actually, it's an open space in the nature, and it can also be a space for ceremonies or for local traditional opera performances. So after introducing the different subjects, I want to get into more details with this agricultural production and local food system. And because when you talk about rural, you can't really avoid agriculture and its production. And actually, many of our rural culture, especially intangible culture, is formed based on agriculture. And agricultural production actually become the starting point for different villages as the key elements to restore its intangible cultural heritage, cultural identity, at the same time also to increase the village revenue and income. So we started with this brown sugar brown sugar factory in Xing village, where it's the village is known for its brown sugar production, and a new factory is built to integrate existing family workshops into a village union, and to establish this collective economic entity. So this goes back to the first project when we talk about the social structure, social system within China, rural village system. And of course, this is a collective space to upgrade the production conditions standards with enlarged space, a central production space, and also a space for community activities, for leisure, and other events. So this actually the brown sugar production from this village is really known in the entire region, and it has a history that can really go back to hundreds of years, with this traditional production of brown sugar. It has the best quality in the region, but also the traditional way of making tofu, making brown sugar it's a striking performance. But of course, there was many concerns with the fire risks and also hygiene issues. So if you walked into a production made basically in the family kitchen, even though it tastes good, but you would have concerns about this product. So there was the whole idea of building a new factory is really to upgrade the production quality standards, so to fit with the food certificate standards, and to improve the production quality. At the same time, also to introduce this making of brown sugar, cooking of brown sugar as the village intangible cultural heritage. And so this is the production starting in November during the winter season before the Chinese New Year, and it's very much a celebration in a village, that you can really smell the sweetness of the sugar of the cooking. And the masters, these are the cooking masters from the village, their movement and their motion they make them the figures, the actors on stage. So the architectural idea with this factory is really to take this cooking process as a performance, this main production space as the central stage of the entire building, and the other buildings will scatter around, the other programs scattered around. And of course, this rhythm of skylight, chimney, working stations actually become the background to present the movement and also the steam, the heat, which is really a performance scene during the production. And it runs 24 hours a day with 3 shifts. That means every 8 hours there's a new shift. And all these workstations are operated by different family workshops, and they are integrated into a collective entity to operate and as the shareholders to operate the factory. And they are also the owners of this new economic new business entity. And we didn't only design the space, we also, we didn't design the costume, but we bought all these outfits, the working outfit from our online, which is about €2 a set. But we specially picked this very bright color, so the cooking masters are really the celebrities on stage. And the whole space is designed to open up with the cooking scene to be seen by visitors from different angles. So to make the production process as a not only a performance, but also an educational process for visitors. For example, someone like me coming from city. And it was really wonderful to get to understand how the sugar cane was grown, was planted, and how the cooking process went through the winter season. And also we have the space next to the central stage is a leisure place for villagers, but also for the visitors. So during the cooking production season, this becomes the selling station. So in a way, with the building actually promotes for this brown sugar in the region, and it's also a way to not only to brand the sugar, but also to increase the price of the sugar. Actually, the price increased for 4 to 5 times over the last years. So in a way, also increased the village revenue. These are the visitor space. Of course, we also worked with the local material, and the space is also used as during the non-production season. It becomes a multiple space, multiple functional for cultural activities, for leisure purpose. And in another mountain village, this is also a Hakka village, and Caizhai has the best tofu in the region. So a new tofu factory is built at the entrance of the village. Next to this is the new tofu factory, and this is the historical building right across the water. So this becomes a cluster open to public at the entrance of the village, and unlike the brown sugar production, it's one central stage with the main production, central production space. The making of tofu is actually divided into different procedure, different chapters. So that's production scene. And do I have? Let me go track. So it's actually the building is actually following this terraced topography, and it's also divided into 6 compartments based on the production procedure. From you enter from this storage, and then the soaking and grinding, boiling, deep frying and tasting. So when you started, if you want to design a project like that, you really need to understand very specific techniques of different cooking productions system of each food. But I think it was also very fun, pleasant journey for me. It was really a learning process. So this is the grinding area, and then again, this tofu factory is also operated by family workshops as the shareholders. That means they're the owners of this operation, and at the same time, it's also becoming, the factory is a stage or a series of stages to introduce, to showcase their traditional heritage and techniques. And it becomes also with the parallel walkway for visitors. This factory is also an educational, cultural platform. So the section shows how this building is sitting on the terraced topography at the entrance of the village, and is divided into different compartments based on the production procedure, and it's with a parallel spatial sequence of production and visitors and also villagers to enter the village. And this is also a leisure, just a common space for the local community as well. And finally, you land on this at this tasting hall. This is a multifunctional space for tasting for visitors, but also can become a wedding hall for events and multiple functional or a summer pavilion. In a way that all these acupunctural spaces in projects in the rural villages, they always engage with multiple functional and minimal maintenance methods. And in the different village, Henzhang, we also looked into this abandoned historical workshop, which used to be for the camellia oil, and it was built over 100 years ago, and then was abandoned for decades. So we wanted to reactivate this, not only to revive the building, but also to revive this production technique, which is part of the intangible cultural heritage of this factory, this village. So this is the original rammed earth historical traditional building for workshop, for production. And of course with new, it's a renovation, but also the addition to extend with other programs and spaces, also the leisure space pavilion for villagers, and also to relocate the kitchen from interior to a semi-outdoor space for safety reasons. So that's the cluster of building that looking from exterior, and this is a pavilion next to the water, designed and built by local villagers, local skilled construction workers. And our addition is to have introduce a new layer of extension spaces. And actually the wall is with this concrete framing and built with the stone, the pebble collected from the water and cut in half to with this texture that really making a contrast with the central rammed earth walls. And this is a kitchen removed away from the interior. And so in general, it creates this maze labyrinth space around the historical workshop. And when you land at the center of the space within the original workshop, you can observe this production of a camellia oil. It's a milling system, and also the extraction process with this traditional wooden facilities, machineries. And the architectural intervention is rather to preserve most of the textures, and the new addition is to replace a portion of the roof tiles into local glass tiles, and to bring in new, more natural lighting into the space, also to introduce this new, a new layer of atmosphere of light. And later on, we were also invited by Zimu Mountain Committee, which is belonging to actually to the neighbor county, and they wanted to work with a tea workshop for their tea production. In general, all these food factories are providing local-made food with upgraded quality. To actually, it's the supply is within the region, within this county region, and also become a educational circulation for the local, to engage the local elementary and middle schools as their classrooms on site to understand their tradition and heritage. So in Shimu Mountain, we were invited by the local committee for a new tea workshop to provide a space to showcase their production, but also a tea house for the visitors, and it's functioning not only as a production space but also as a cultural platform. So this is the tea space, actually locating on the mountain on a flat space location site with a very regular. It's a rectangular box sitting on a flat location, And this is the only Shi minority county in China, so we also wanted to dedicate this tea space to the local Shi culture with this new building. So this workshop itself actually is more of a cultural building and provide leisure programs for the local communities as well. And it's sitting on the mountain with a very regular rectangular space with the production and visitor lounge in the center, and also tea tasting tea house looking out to the mountain. And this rectangular box is interjected with 8 light tunnels to bring in natural lighting to this central lounge. So that's how it's looking. It's horizontal space with light tunnels extruding from its rooftop, sitting on top of this cliff. And the production, of course, is done by the local skilled villagers with a traditional handmade tea making process. And if you look at the background wall, this is actually a cultural image. Well, it's a preparation for the sun shading, but we also wanted to introduce this layer of pictograph of Shi minority, that they don't have the written system. They have the speaking language, but not the written system. Instead, they have this pictograph. So we wanted to use all these pictograph images and as the symbols on the wall. And on its elevation, it's starting from land, mud, and then going to sky, to the sun on the top. So basically, it's reconfiguring an image of this mountain farming and hunting scenes of the Shi minority people. And with this project, we wanted to, it was quite an experiment for us, that we wanted to try a bit further how through architecture, through the space, we can translate the culture and tradition, or the legacy and heritage. So we started to look into the agriculture is basically the most fundamental living pattern in the rural villages. And if we look into the ancient China, we didn't have 12 months in a year. Instead of, we have the solar terms, 24 solar terms, which is, we also call it the agricultural calendar, that really indicates the pattern of weather and the pattern of agricultural activities. And during a day, we don't have 24 hours, we have 12 hours instead. That's actually the zodiac hours. So basically, the zodiac hour is actually to reveal the activity patterns of different animals, different species. So from the sunrise, actually so we took this summer solstice. If you're under summer solstice, which is the day of the year that we have the maximum daylight, right? The maximum length of the daytime. And it's the most celebrated day of the year by all different cultures and religions around the world. And of course, it's also a very important traditional holiday festival in the Chinese culture, especially with the rural area. So we took this day of summer solstice and looked into the zodiac hours, the sunrise from the rabbit hour, and dragon, snake in the morning, and horse hour is the time around 2 hours around noon, and then in the afternoon, goat, monkey, and rooster is the sunset hour. So this becomes an exercise. We wanted to introduce all these light tunnels, bringing lights to the central walkway as a sundial, indicating the pattern or the rhythm of the summer solstice day. So each light tunnel is actually positioned from the sunrise, according to the hours, from the sunrise to sunset, 7 hours during the daytime, and at the room it's 2 vertical and tunnels, light tunnels at the end of the building. So it goes around from the sunrise, it really goes around to sunset here, and each angle is coordinating with its own zodiac hour. So that means that during the summer solstice time, well, more or less with about 1 month's time, the light from specific zodiac hour could only come into the space with a direct light from its coordinated hour or light tunnel. So it's a bit complicated. It took us so much time to work with this project. So that's a direct light coming. But then I want to show you is how do we do? Can we play this short video? Hello? Because this actually, let me see. No, it doesn't work that way. Well, we have this time-elapse video, really shows how the light coming into the space, and it goes, do we have any technical assistant upstairs? No. Okay, we have to miss this one. But this was really, all the work finally paid off, and we were able to capture this time elapse of how the light actually going through the space, really as a performance during the summer solstice. So it was really a challenge, but also we wanted to try this, how to make a space to capture time. And actually not only the time as an abstract concept, but time is really revealing the rhythm of how we live on the planet. And with this cultural metaphor of agricultural calendar or zodiac hours, it's really a message that we are coexisting with other species, and we acknowledge that since our ancient time, but it's all almost forgotten in our modern time.
Can you still talk about the quartz?
Oh yeah, sure. So this becomes a sculpture or a monument to address to our nature and the earth and the sun. And I have a quarry project. And now and later on we were invited by another neighbor county with this quarry project. Actually, we actually brought up this proposal to the county authorities that we would like to investigate further with this quarry resource. We consider that valuable local resource, even if the quarries were abandoned in the region for over 2 decades by now. It used to be operated by the family workshops, and so if eventually there are over 3,000 small caves left in this Jingyun region, and these become abandoned and considered as the waste from a abandoned industry or production. So we actually, after research, we proposed to work with a cluster of quarries in the region, also next to the villages, and in this scenic district. Instead of making new buildings for cultural facilities, we propose that we look into existing available space resource in the region. But first of all, the first challenge is to work with the geotechnical engineers for the safety reinforcement, so to eliminate the safety risks. And there was carefully done with the concrete reinforcement, and then later on the design was done in 4 months, and in the next 6 months we were able to finish construction for 3 quarries. And then the first quarry, as the first one of the cluster, is programmed as a live stage for the local quarry workers to demonstrate their quarrying technique. And the second one is converted into a performance space based on its acoustical quality in the quarry. And of course, our intervention is rather with the ground surface to create a different atmosphere. Also, a thin water can, when it's needed, but also to collect rainwater, but also it could work as a stage, as a sunken central stage for the young villagers in a village for their entertainment and performance, or for more traditional local opera performance. And the last quarry next to, actually these three are not too far away, become a space that we wanted to also dedicate to the local cultural calligraphy heritage in the region. So when you enter the quarry, you start to see this concrete reinforcement. It's done designed by our geotechnical engineer, but it's really resembling the quarry texture to form this gate. And then if you enter the space, the inverse topography become a book mountain with an our design intervention is to introduce this a new layer, almost a surface or a membrane, to indicate activities, a new program, public cultural activities into this quarry. So walkways or terraces, and this is the book mountain is a Chinese cultural metaphor we also call it a mountain of knowledge. So this is actually translated into the space only with by this simplified structure and material, which is the engineered bamboo panels that really wrapping around existing topography, existing terraces, and to create new landing platform, landing points for public activities. And the whole design idea with this quarry project is not to present the architectural style, it's rather to bring out the attention toward the quarry spaces as spectacular architecture produced, actually done by hand, manually produced by the local quarry workers, as land art, and also the joint. We found that the joint, in between these new addition, which is prefabricated in the factories, and between and also with this very organic form carved by the quarry workers, and that reveal a new kind of a jointing or meeting layer. And the spaces, of course, we see this as a monument to address to the local quarry heritage and address the local quarry workers. And the last project is our current project. I will go very quickly with this one. It's still under design, but I want to introduce and communicate with everybody that how architects, or our work is not only working with the given program, but we can really, step out of our office and to work on the field, communicate with the local communities, and also to discover, to explore with the local resource, but really could become the inspiration for architectural design. So this is also a small island in South China, and it's a home island of Mazu, the goddess of sea, actually. Macau, the name of Macau comes from Mazu. So with this island, we wanted to introduce architectural intervention, not only with this cultural custom belief, but rather with its ecosystem, with its very unusual living or life happening on the island compared to continent. So first of all, we work with this mangrove cultivation system, which is really an intelligent ecosystem to restore our coastal line with the biodiversity, and not only with the plantation, but we also worked with the existing abandoned structures for a new research facility for the scientists, for the researchers, also as an incubator for mangrove cultivation. And that works with the abandoned structure to reinvent into a new cultural, educational, or research facility. And on the island, if you look into the wastewater, actually it's the opposite of living on continent, where wastewater is the waste. But on island, wastewater is still valuable resource for fresh water. So there's already local indigenous tradition of having small ponds, circular ponds, to store rainwater and to, with its natural filtration of this wastewater collected within the village, and to store for different purpose, for irrigation of trees or vegetable farms. So this brings a idea, inspiration for a new program of water treatment plant, and it's a infrastructure project to collect wastewater, to go through different terraces of lotus pond or water grass, a natural filtration system, and collect water in the center of this pond, but also become a community space and or educational space. And the water we filter through this plant can provide the amount of water, irrigation water, for the adjacent vegetable farms. And we also discovered that there's a very intelligent oyster and seaweed coexistence system, or symbiosis, or this mariculture system on this island, and it becomes an inspiration for a new cultivation space, also integrate with the cultural leisure program and adjacent to this original cultivation workshops. So that brings a program of a new building with this different cultural or facilities wrapping around this central oyster seaweed cultivation incubator. And of course, the fishermen are living on the ocean for their fish cultivation. And we're still working with this proposal, but I wanted to share some images of how this is really fabulous architecture system for us, I think. And yeah, we'll see how it will lead to. So this is for today. Thank you so much.
So thank you for your patience, and thank you for the theater for setting it all up at last minute, and Open House Basel to include this here.